In a nightclub there stand two people. The first, a man whose mind is boosted several times by a nanodrug, his face terrified, and a pistol in his hand pointing at the other. A young girl, her face nonchalant, as she says simply, "No matter where you go, everyone's connected." The man realizes the truth of this, shoots himself, and his body hits the ground. This is part of the terrifying screenplay of Chiaki Konaka in the series Night Serial Experiments Lane. And it's one of many cyberpunk stories that does an excellent job of highlighting a series of near futures that are improbable in their technical accuracy, either because they're too far away or too close to the present, but excellent in the implications that they provide. So in this talk, I'm going to talk to you about what cyberpunk is, what its predictive validity is, and what those implications are as they extend out into our current world. So first I'll bring you a quote from Bruce Sterling, who says simply, "Cyberpunk is a subgenre of science fiction in futuristic settings that tends to focus on the combination of low life and high tech." So there are 2 points there that we want to focus on. The first is the juxtaposition between low life and high tech. Cyberpunk is built on the aspects of juxtaposition, human beings versus technology, natural versus integration, haves versus those who don't have. And this allows a distinction between individuals that allows commentary to go forth. And the second part of Cyberpunk is near future. Why the futuristic setting? Well, no less a writer than Alan Moore posited a solution, one that he offered when he was talking about making the setting for V for Vendetta. And what he said is as follows: "If I wanted to create a story about this dim and dark present, then there is no better setting than a dim and dark future." And so this implies that cyberpunk has this near future aspect for 2 reasons. The first is that it's sufficiently in the future for us to feel that its social commentary and its conversations and its implications don't affect us directly here and now. But it also means that it's not so far in the future that we're removed from the human element and that we, the viewers, still experience it as if it were us or relatable to us. So now that we've discussed what cyberpunk is, maybe we can get into the concept of its predictive validity. Why is it that cyberpunk is sometimes an oracle and other times a fraudulent seer? Sometimes it appears to be Cassandra and other times it appears to be Miss Cleo. And so we take a look at it and we discover that when you talk about the predictive validity of cyberpunk, you have to choose what conceptual springboard you go off of. You can either pick the springboard of things remaining similar as they are, or things that will be different fundamentally. And we have an excellent recourse to this when we talk about the 1893 Chicago World Fair. So in that, a variety of experts from various fields made their predictions as to what the future would contain. The Postmaster General went with a similar approach. He argued that in the future, postage will cost but 1 cent. Lo and behold, his prediction is actually on the close side of future. No less than 1914, the United States postage stamp cost but 2 cents. And then when you adjust from inflation over the next 100 years from 1914 to 2014, you find that while inflation has risen 23 times, the cost of that postage stamp has gone up 15 times, meaning he was well 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years in advance on his guess. Meanwhile, if you predicted opposite of things continuing in a normal trend, you would have something such as Erastus Williamson, who said, "There will be no need for standing army." Well, that would require a fundamental shift in the human condition, which has not been borne out. And so, while both predictions were made at the same time, the fact that one was based in similarity gave it more weight and accuracy than the one that was predicted on a fundamental change. We see this in Cyberpunk as well. In the Cyberpunk role-playing tabletop game Continuum, there is a prediction that time travel is made between 2000 and the year 2200 AD. Having not yet come to pass, doesn't seem to be quite as accurate, or seems more fantastical. Meanwhile, we look at Serial Experiments Lane, which posited that there would be a global super information network that would pervade every aspect of our lives. And even now, this video is going up on YouTube. Seems closer to the present than we would care to admit. So now that we see that the predictive validity is based somewhat on what basis you pick to springboard off of for your predictions, we can ask questions such as, what are the implications of this? What does this actually mean? So we get two meta trends out of this. The first is that predictive error grows with temporal distance. If you attempt to posit a world that's 20 or 30 years in the future, or merely a small continuation from existing technology, you're actually likely to be prescient and be wrong on the close side of history. It will come to you faster. Whereas if you predict that something will happen more in the future, 100 years, 150 years, 1,000 years, then you tend to be less technically accurate and less socially and constructedly accurate as well. The second social trend we might note, there we go, is that human trends pervade across temporal technological differences. So the invention of the book, the invention of the internet, the printing press, all of these things are great technological achievements that have fundamentally changed the world around us. But if you predict that human nature will remain similar, then your estimations of what will happen with technology will remain consistent, as we all share the common factor of being human beings. So for example, technology creates gaps. The possession of technology and the dispossession from technology creates gaps between people. The differences between thoughts and actions grow as technology has continued to expand. Because of this, conformity increases, the pressure for integration increases, and that said, the gap between the individual and the group also increases, as the individual is made not to be individual, but to become more like the rest. And so in this conversation, brief as it was, we talked about a couple of topics. We talked about what cyberpunk is. We talked about how it gives us a reference for what predictive validity is and what springboards we can use, and then some of the implications of it. To round this off, I want to leave you with a note from a game called Fallout 4, in which Bethesda Games utters the immortal line, "War never changes." And the reason is that the human beings behind war have yet to change. Now, does this mean that great things are coming in the future? Does a dark horizon loom? It depends on what you think cyberpunk tells you about what you think you know about human nature.